This is Book 10, the Book of the Double Twilight. It begins in darkness. It begins with a continuation of the darkness that we were seeing at the end of Book 9. And it has 4 cantos. It's called the Book of the Double Twilight. Twilight in itself is double. It's a mixture of dark and light. And here in this book, he's going to show us 2 different kinds of twilight. Something between darkness and light. The first one, the first canto, is called The Dream Twilight of the Ideal. And it begins on page 599. That first canto is called The Dream Twilight of the Ideal. But as I said, it begins in the darkness, that same darkness that we were following in the Book of Eternal Night, which we finished last week. But that's only in the first section of this canto. Then we move into a beautiful twilight, the twilight of the ideal. Then Canto 2 is called The Gospel of Death and Vanity of the Ideal. In that canto, Death tries to convince Savitri that all the beautiful dreams and visions she has experienced in the twilight of the ideal, that all that is nonsense. It is just ideal. It is dreams, visions. It has no reality. And then we come to the very, very important third canto, The Debate of Love and Death. And we can say that this debate between love, which says yes to everything that is lovable, and wants everything that is lovable to be able to live forever. And on the other hand, there are all the forces of negativity that want to say that love can't last, life can't last, the universe can't last. All that negativity is expressed in the voice of the god of death. And then he shows to Savitri, the last canto, the dream twilight of the earthly real, the kind of reality that we experience here on earth. It's also a kind of twilight. It's not a beautiful, luminous twilight like the twilight of the ideal. It's a twilight of disillusion and darkness and ignorance. But at the very end of that canto, Savitri, with the power of the Supreme Divine Mother, is able to conquer death. And at the end, she and Shraddhavan are left standing alone in light, and they will move forward into the world of everlasting day. This is an important book. Mother was very, very interested in this book, and she set out to translate it all into French. And she did translate quite a large part of it into French. And she said, I'm not doing this to show to anybody. This is for myself. And it seems that she felt very, very enriched by that work of translating this book 10. And I remember the last time we were reading it in the group here, in the Sunday group here, all the people who participated, we also found it a very, very enriching experience. Because often death seems to speak about the things that we feel and believe. No? But Savitri tells him, oh, death, you give the truth that destroys. I give the truth that saves from destruction. So on those same facts and arguments, she puts a different twist, reveals wonderful higher truths. So we'll start exploring the first section. Perhaps we won't complete it today, but we'll start. You remember that Death, Shraddhavan, Savitri, they were moving in the darkness, phantasmal in the dimness, moved the three. So this begins. All still was darkness, dread and desolate. There was no change, nor any hope of change. In this black dream, which was a house of void, a walk to nowhere in a land of naught, ever they drifted without aim or goal. Gloom led to worse gloom, depth to an emptier depth. In some positive non-beings, purposeless vast, through formless wastes, dumb and unknowable. An ineffectual beam of suffering light through the despairing darkness dogged their steps, like the remembrance of a glory lost. Even while it grew, it seemed unreal there. Yet haunted Nihil's chill, stupendous realm, unquenchable, perpetual, lonely, null, a pallid ghost of some dead eternity. It was as if she must pay now her debt, her vain presumption to exist and think, to some brilliant Maya that conceived her soul. This most she must absolve with endless pangs, her deep original sin, the will to be, and the sin last, greatest, the spiritual pride that, made of dust, equaled itself with heaven, its scorn of the worm writhing in the mud, condemned, ephemeral, born from nature's dream, refusal of the transient creature's role, the claim to be a living fire of God, the will to be immortal and divine. In that tremendous darkness, heavy and bare. She atoned for all since the first act, whence sprang the error of the consciousness of time, the rending of the inconscient seal of sleep, the primal and unpardoned revolt that broke the peace and silence of the nothingness which was before a seeming universe appeared in a vanity of imagined space, and life arose, engendering grief and pain. A great negation was the real's face, prohibiting the vain process of time. And when there is no world, no creature more, when time's intrusion has been blotted out, it shall last, unbodied, saved from thought, at peace. Accursed in what had been her Godhead source, condemned to live forever empty of bliss, her immortality, her chastisement, her spirit, guilty of being, wandered, doomed, moving forever through eternal night. You will begin, Rosa.
All still was darkness, dread, and desolate. There was no change, nor any hope of change.
Yes, we'll just look at these two lines. So this is the continuation from the previous book, the previous canto. Now as we begin this book 10, the book of the double twilight, Sri Aurobindo tells us it was all the same. It was still dark, a dreadful, frightening, terrifying darkness. And it's desolate. There's no life, there's no beauty there. And no change comes. There doesn't seem to be any hope of a change. This is the eternal night. Sarojini.
In this black dream, which was a house of poet, a world to nowhere in a land of naught, ever they
Drifted.
without aim or goal. The gloom led to O's gloom, depth to unemptied depth. In some positive known beings of purposeful past, through formless, wisdom and
Unknowable. Yes. So this seems to be a bad dream that they are living in. A black dream. And this black dream, he says, is a house of emptiness, of void. There's nothing. They seem to be walking to nowhere. They seem to be walking to nowhere in a land of nothingness. Naught. There's nothing. Sri Aurobindo told us before that they don't walk the way that we do on earthly soil. They're drifting, floating. They don't seem to have any aim. They are not going anywhere. They are not aiming at anywhere. There's no goal. They're in the gloom, in the darkness, and the further they go, the darker it becomes. Gloom led to worse gloom. And this deepness, this depth of emptiness seems to lead to deeper depths, but which are even more empty. Sri Aurobindo says they are in some positive non-beings, purposeless vast. This phrase, positive non-being, it's a contradiction, no? It's an oxymoron. How can non-being, asat, how can that be positive? But they are experiencing it as very positive, this non-being. It's very threatening and painful. It's vast. It seems to have no purpose. And they seem to be passing through these wastes, these deserted, empty spaces which are formless and dumb. They don't, not only they can't speak, they don't express anything. And they seem to be unknowable, as if they can't be understood, grasped, known in any way. But there is some light there, Bhavana.
This is here it says without aim, but the god of death has an aim, taking Satyavan's soul to somewhere to his realm.
But that aim is not clear. Perhaps he's happy just to have him here in this eternal night. That they don't seem to be going anywhere. At least that is the feeling as they drift along. Where could they be going to in this formless darkness?
An ineffectual beam of suffering light through the despairing darkness dogged the steps, like the remembrance of a glory long. Even while it grew, it seemed unreal there, yet haunted Nihil's chill, stupendous realm, unquenchable, perpetual, lonely, null, a pallid ghost of some dead eternity.
Yes. You know this phrase, to dog your steps? That's what a dog does. He will follow you. Something that dogs your steps. He go wherever you go, it will follow you. So what is following them? A beam of light. But it's an ineffectual light. It's not very strong. It's not able to light up anything much. It's just a small, faint, weak light. And, Sri Aurobindo says, that light is suffering. It's suffering from the pressure of the darkness. But through that darkness that's full of despair, that little light is following them. And he says it's like a remembrance, a faint memory of some lost glory of great light. And what is more, it is growing. It's not staying the same. It is growing more powerful, even as it grew. Well, it is growing, but still it seems to be something that is unreal there, that doesn't belong there. And yet it's haunting this realm of nihil, of nothingness. Nihil, it is the Latin word for nothing. And this time it has a capital N. So this is the essential or everlasting nothingness. This is the kingdom of nothingness, which is chill. It's cold. There's no light and no warmth. It is stupendous. It's extremely vast. It seems limitless. This tiny little light is haunting it. It won't go away. It is remaining there, following Shraddhavan, Death, Savitri, as they drift through the darkness and the nothingness.
Despairing means? Despairing means?
To despair means to have no hope. When you are in despair, you have no hope. So that darkness is like that. And that little light, it says, is unquenchable. You quench a candle flame, you blow it out, or you put a snuffer on top of it. If you're very thirsty, you will drink water to quench your thirst. If there's a fire, you will pour water or get the fire extinguisher to quench it, to put it out. This little light can't be put out. It is unquenchable. It's perpetual. It remains. It persists. But it is lonely, and it seems that it is null, as if it has no effect. This is like ineffectual. It's a pallid ghost of some dead eternity. It might be the remains, the faint, subtle remains of something that once existed, an eternity which no longer exists. Yes, Sergei.
What is the suffering light?
What is this suffering light? It is an attribute of Savitri.
What?
An attribute or a quality of Savitri. And why is it suffering will be explained in the next sentence. Martin?
It was as if she must pay now her debt, her vain presumption to exist and think, to some brilliant Maya that conceived her soul.
Yes. It's as if she, Savitri, is being punished. As if now she has to pay for something that she has done wrong. And what has she done wrong? She has dared to exist, to be, and to think. In that realm of nothingness, people are not allowed to exist and to think. And anything that thinks and exists has to suffer for it. And she has to pay this debt to some brilliant Maya, to some power of illusion which has thought up, conjured up her soul. That's the first part of what she's being punished for. To conceive, it is to think up an idea. Patricia, you would read?
This most she must absolve with endless pangs, her deep original sin, the will to be, and the sin last, greatest, the spiritual pride that, made of dust, equaled itself with heaven, its scorn of the worm writhing in the mud, condemned ephemeral, born from nature's dream, refusal of the transient creature's role, the claim to be a living fire of God, the will to be immortal and divine.
Yes. We've seen that Savitri has made this claim, no, in the previous canto. She says, I know that my coming was away from God. So, this is a kind of psychological warfare that is going on. Death is trying to convince her that now she has to suffer because of this great wickedness that she has shown. And she's going to have to suffer forever. This most she must absolve. We absolve our sins through suffering. She will have to absolve it with endless pangs. Here it's quite a Christian idea. In Christianity, there is this idea that we human beings, however good we try to be, we are always sinful, imperfect, because there's an original sin. Just by being born, we are sinful. So that is the first part. The will to be, that she's had the audacity, presumption to exist. And then there's also the last and the greatest sin, to have that spiritual pride, to believe or to claim that she is a living fire of God, that she's carrying something divine in her, and this will she has to be immortal and divine. How can a being that is made of dust, a material being like us, how can a human being equal themselves with heaven? Human beings must accept, Death said, you have to accept to be a worm. That's what you are. You live in the mud. But here you are not accepting to be a worm. Even though you know that you are ephemeral, that your being will last only for a very short time. There are some insects which only live a few hours, no? Ephemerids. They pass very quickly. Something that's ephemeral, it's there and then it's gone. And you have only been born out of this dream of nature. There's nothing real about you. But here you are refusing your role as a dream creature, a transient creature who is just appears for a short time and then is dissolved. Now you have to suffer because of this claim that you are carrying within you, a living fire of God. You have the will to be immortal and divine. And it's as if death is showing her that I'm the one who rules here, and I am not going to allow any of this. You will be punished. Ganga Lakshmi.
In that tremendous darkness heavy and bare, she atoned for all sins the first act when sprang, the error of consciousness of time, the rending of the unconscious seal of sleep, the primal and unpardoned revolts of broke, the peace and silence of nothingness, which was before a seeming universe, appearing the vanity of imagined space. A life arose engendering grief and pain.
We'll stop there. So if you have sinned, if you've done something against the will of God, you may have to atone for that. You may have to pay for it. So that is the suffering that is going on now. In that tremendous darkness, heavy, bare, she, Savitri, is atoning. She's paying for everything, not only her own life, but for everything from the very beginning of the universe. From everything, from the first act, out of which sprang the error of the consciousness of time. At the beginning of the manifestation, there's been some kind of an act which willed time and space and individualization. So now she has to pay for that, for this waking up out of the sleep of the inconscient, where there was no consciousness. No. This was death. This death who is fighting with her now experiences this waking up as a revolt, a rebellion. This is the primal, the original rebellion, is the beginning to wake up out of the inconscient. And it's unpardoned. This force of darkness will never pardon, it will never forgive that rebellion that broke, that disturbed the peace and the silence of the nothingness which was there before this seeming universe, this illusory universe appeared. In this illusory, imagined space. It doesn't really exist. It's all only an illusion. But nevertheless, that out of that revolt and out of that breaking of the peace and silence of the nothingness, life has arisen. And that has given rise to grief and to pain.
It is not Savitri's fault. No? It is the evolution that happens. No?
Yes.
But for that, Savitri being
But it seems she has to atone for that. That death wants to punish all that has happened and disturbed his peace and nothingness. And she is the representative of that creative power and urge. It's very mysterious passages now. I'm sorry, I can't see who's sitting at the back there. Will you read? Yeah.
The great negation was the real base, political, the real process of time. And when there is no word, no creature more, when time, institution has been blotted out, it shall last unburied, safe from thought at peace.
Yes. A great negation, a great no, is the face, the appearance of reality in this experience which Savitri is having now. Only that no seems to be real. And that no is prohibiting, forbidding even the movement of time. It's saying no to all that. And it is saying that when all this material universe has vanished, when there is no world left, and there are no creatures anymore, and when this intrusion, this unwelcome intrusion is when somebody comes in when they're not wanted, no? Has been blotted out, when that time has been finished, that negation will still be there. It will last when everything else has gone. It will last without any body, and then it will be at peace because there'll be no more thought. And it's strange that the physicists, the scientists, this is what they tell us will happen. No? That our universe, our physical universe, had a beginning and it's going to end. All the stars have come up and given rise to all these, all the different chemical elements, and out of those life has emerged. But all this is going to end. They even have a date. No? They say after so many years, the stars will start to go out, our sun will go out. That will be the end of time and space and universe. More than a pralaya, complete universal dissolution. Yeah.
The scientists are saying,
I'm sure they are wrong. I'm absolutely sure that they are wrong. But
they say the energy in the sun is will burn out in so many millions of years, then there will be no sun.
yeah, the other day I saw such an interesting program on the TV. The title of the program was "What is Life?" and it was by a physicist. And he had found a book by another physicist which suggested and showed that life is a process of energy. And then this physicist said, all the energy in our universe has emerged from that Big Bang. But he said, energy is eternal. It is one of the laws of physics that matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed. It's all come from somewhere. Yes. And it's just changing its form, and life is a process of that. So all this energy out of the Big Bang, just here in a few places where conditions are right, some of that energy is used in the processes of life. But he spent an hour showing that the potentiality for life must have been there in the universe from the very beginning. And then I thought, yes, he should read Sri Aurobindo, and he should take one step further and realize that if the potentiality for life has been there from the very beginning, then obviously the potentiality for consciousness has been there from the very beginning. And while life is taking lower forms of energy and turning them into all these wonderful trees and flowers and animals and everything. Consciousness is doing that even more. It is eating plants and animals and creating so much more. And that is going to go on. Higher and higher forms of consciousness energy are going to be formed. And the stars will not go out, for sure not. That's my idea. Sorry, digression. Sergei.
First, the God had been the Godhead source, and then to live forever and for bliss, for immortality, the chastisement, the spirit guilty of being, wandering doomed, moving forever through eternal night.
Yes. So again, this Christian terminology, the idea of being cursed. You've done something wrong. You have to be punished. So she is now, he is trying to convince her that she is accursed in what had been her source of divinity or her divine source. She is immortal. She will go on being immortal. And she will have to go on suffering. She will have to, she's condemned to live forever empty of bliss. That is hell, when you have to live forever empty of bliss. So her immortality is her chastisement, her punishment. So that is how he wants her to feel, that her spirit, guilty of existing, will wander forever, doomed, condemned to move forever through eternal night, that it will never stop. It will go on and on and on into eternity. So this is the impression that death wants to impose on Savitri. But now Sri Aurobindo gives us a different insight. Praveen.
But Maya is the veil of absolute. The truth occurred has made this mighty world. The Eternal's wisdom in self-knowledge act, in ignorant mind, and in the body's steps. The inconscient is the superconscient deep.
This is a completely different view, no? Maya is not a power of illusion, it's just a veil of the absolute. And a hidden truth has made all this mighty world, this material universe. It's the wisdom and the self-knowledge of the eternal which are acting even in our ignorant minds. And in the steps of the body, what the body does. What we call the inconscient is a sleep, a state of sleep of the superconscient, of that highest level of conscious energy. It's another way of looking at things. Joel.
An unintelligible intelligence invents creation's paradox profound. Spiritual thought is crammed in matter's forms, and seeing it throws out a dumb energy and works miracle by a machine.
Yes. An unintelligible intelligence. We know what intelligence is. Sometimes we can't understand something. It's so mysterious. Some people, when we first start to read Savitri, it seems unintelligible. We can't understand it. So we can't understand that intelligence that is making this deep paradox of creation. A paradox is something which seems to contradict itself, but it's not really a contradiction. It's a complex statement of a truth. No? Spiritual thought is crammed in matter's forms. That, I think, is what I was trying to say. That these forms, lower forms of energy that we call matter, they are packed with the possibility of spiritual thought, of higher consciousness. And that spiritual thought that is packed in these forms of matter, unseen, it's throwing out this dumb, silent energy, and it's working a miracle by machine. Out of nothing, it has made the stars, it has made the solar systems and the planets and the life on the planets. And in fact, it is getting more and more and more rich and complex. It's not running down. It's not dying. It seems to be a mechanical process, but in fact, it's all just absolutely miraculous. I remember when I was small, I used to think it's so amazing that I grow. Last year I was small, and now I'm bigger. How does it happen? It's a miracle, in fact. These are miracles. One more sentence. Chandra. Yes.
All here is a mystery of conjuring. Darkness and magic of self-hidden light. Suffering some secret raptures, tragic man, and death an instrument of perpetual life.
Yes, you know what perpetual means, Chandra? Perpetual, do you know what it means? It goes on and on and on forever. And how does it go on? How does life go on? This body dies, and the life force that is in it goes away, but then the elements of this dead body pass into another life form. So death is an instrument of perpetual life. Suffering is like the tragic mask. The ancient Greeks, they used to symbolize the theatre by two masks. One of them has a big smile, and the other one has the tragic mask. These are different ways of looking at life. And actually the Greeks found that it was very healthy for a society, a group of people living in a city, if once a year they would worship Dionysus, the god of delight. And they did it in two ways. They got their best poets to write plays for them. And they would see very, very tragic, pathetic, painful stories enacted. And then they would see comedies, and they would laugh themselves silly and roll about in the streets. And these two things, they are great thinkers. They said, this is very, very purifying for people to see that your life, that our life, that human life, that sometimes it's a tragedy and sometimes it's a comedy. And to have these intense emotions is very good both for our bodies and our spirits. So.
But the tragedy is also comedy.
Well, there you are. Actually, of course, the Elizabethan poet Shakespeare, he invented a different kind of drama, which was tragicomedy, where it was mixed up. But the Greeks always kept it very pure. That there were poets who wrote tragedies, and then there were different poets who wrote comedies. And they were both valuable in the social health. Yes, a comedy is something that ends happily. And a tragedy is something that ends sadly. So everything here is a mystery of contraries, of opposites. Darkness itself, this terrible darkness that is oppressing Savitri, it is a magic of self-hidden light, as if the light concentrates itself, and then it becomes so dense that it's darkness. Suffering is just some tragic mask, a drama of secret rapture, of an inner delight. This is part of this mystery of contraries. So that's where we'll stop today. Shall we read these lines together?
All still was darkness, dread and desolate. There was no change, nor any hope of change. In this black dream, which was a house of void, a walk to nowhere in a land of naught, ever they drifted without aim or goal. Gloom led to worse gloom, depth to an emptier depth. In some positive non-being's purposeless vast, through formless wastes, dumb and unknowable. An ineffectual beam of suffering light through the despairing darkness dogged their steps, like the remembrance of a glory lost. Even while it grew, it seemed unreal there. Yet haunted nihil's chill, stupendous realm, unquenchable, perpetual, lonely, null, a pallid ghost of some dead eternity. It was as if she must pay now her debt, her vain presumption to exist and think, to some brilliant Maya that conceived her soul. This most she must absolve with endless pangs, her deep original sin, the will to be, and the sin last, greatest, the spiritual pride that, made of dust, equalled itself with heaven. Its scorn of the worm writhing in the mud, condemned, ephemeral, born from nature's dream, refusal of the transient creature's role, the claim to be a living fire of God, the will to be immortal and divine. In that tremendous darkness, heavy and bare, she atoned for all, since the first act whence sprang the error of the consciousness of time, the rending of the inconscient seal of sleep. The primal and unpardoned revolt that broke the peace and silence of the nothingness, which was before a seeming universe appeared in a vanity of imagined space, and life arose, engendering grief and pain. A great negation was the real's face, prohibiting the vain process of time. And when there is no world, no creature more, when time's intrusion has been blotted out, it shall last, unbodied, saved from thought, at peace. Accursed in what had been her Godhead source, condemned to live forever empty of bliss, her immortality, her chastisement, her spirit, guilty of being, wandered, doomed, moving forever through eternal night. But Maya is a veil of the Absolute. A truth occult has made this mighty world. The Eternal's wisdom and self-knowledge act in ignorant mind and in the body's steps. The inconscient is the superconscient's sleep. An unintelligible intelligence invents creation's paradox profound. Spiritual thought is crammed in matter's forms. Unseen, it throws out a dumb energy and works a miracle by a machine. All here is a mystery of contraries. Darkness, a magic of self-hidden light. Suffering, some secret rapture's tragic mask. And death, an instrument of perpetual life.